All right, I am here with part two of Myra West's Get to Know Me and Why I Created This Channel. She says it's going to get darker.
Because I know that I'm not the only one who has had the same struggles and gone through the same things. And I know that there are still people in the thick of it, in the thick of the struggle, who I would love to help. And my mind always goes to like young teenagers and especially young girls just like me. My childhood was all in all pretty bad, pretty negative, and it could have been worse, but it was pretty bad because my family life and family were bad. So, like your family is supposed to be, and your home is supposed to be your safe place where you can kind of escape from all the stress of the world.
All right, before we get too far into this, just a warning. I don't know where this is going to go. If it gets really, really dark, you feel free to click away. I'm willing to talk about really dark topics, for sure. And for now, though, I had a rough childhood in certain ways, right? In certain ways, my family was phenomenal. Parents, great. Overall, great job. No major complaints. But a couple of bad things happened to me as a child that were basically outside of my parents' control. Like I said, society was really different, right? Like, kids were more often put at risk than they are today. Just certain things weren't thought about, right? Like you didn't anticipate horrible things happening to kids because it was very hush hush, right? Like those kinds of things, it was like taboo to even talk about, and things like mental health weren't talked about. Not until I was a teenager was mental health even taken seriously by teenagers. Like, it pretty much wasn't until I was like today, mental health, when it pertains to children and adults even, is taken way more seriously. So because of that, people are more on alert about these traumatic experiences happening to children. They're more concerned about it. They're looking out for it. They understand it can happen and that it happens frequently, and they do things to avoid that happening, right? But things were different, in the past. And yeah, it sucks, but also there was I personally feel like some of those really bad experiences kind of there's negative outcomes, but to me there's more positive outcomes because I can help other people. I can help that like not happen to other people, and I can help people deal with similar types of things. And people have reached out to me to talk about things that have happened to them, and I've luckily been able to help them in some way, even if it's just listening to them talk about what happened. And I've had people where they've never told another person in their life what happened to them besides me, and I like that they were able to do that. It actually means a lot to me, and for some of those people, it dramatically, I feel like it dramatically helped them to be able to do that. Some people in particular, I literally got to see their life improve in major ways from being able to open up to somebody and kind of like finally express their feelings on certain things, and that means the world to me when I can be there for pretty much anybody in any type of way, It it just it means a lot. Darn you, Myra West! You said it was going to get dark.
And your parents are supposed to be a safe place or people who you can turn to when you're struggling or, that kind of thing. Ideally. And I know most of us didn't have ideal. But people also say, like, oh, it must be so nice to have so many siblings. Like, it must have been so fun growing up, so many playmates and all of that. When, in my experience, it was just a house of lots of bullies, lots of verbal and physical abuse, and more abuse.
I figured that's exactly where this was going. I kind of knew that what she just said, that's exactly where this was going. And yeah, I also have a big family, a big extended family, and yeah, it creates a level of chaos, a level of, hey, there's a ton of you, you'll watch each other. And I'll just say, I can relate. I'm sure I can relate to when you say other abuse there. It sucks. It's horrible. I like to think that things are getting better, but you and everyone else deserves better than that. And this is the ultimate problem that I have with religious communities, is sometimes you get these small insular communities, and there's so much. I feel like religion overcomplicates life. Like you force this judgment onto people, this original sin, this idea that there's someone in the sky who's judging you, and you need to feel ashamed and terrible for all these things, or else you're going to be punished by God. By literally, God is going to punish you ultimately, eternally, if you slip up, if you make a mistake. That's what it's pushing on people. It's pushing this like anxiety and insecurity and like weakness onto people, right? It's like this illness that gets inflicted upon people. And then you combine that with this like tiny community, this idea that, like she said, like patriarchy. I feel like the patriarchy as a concept, it almost only exists in the context of religion. And it's awful because it kind of shows people like, it just arbitrarily, based off of nothing, gives people power. That's why these priests are doing all this stuff to all these little boys, is because you're just giving power to whoever. You're just saying like, oh, well, you're a male and you decided to follow these rules, and you decided that you wanted to be in this rank of where you'd be alone with little boys. Sure, we'll allow you to be alone with little boys, and if you do anything to them, well, guess what? We're going to help you hide that you did anything to them. It's insane, right? It's completely insane and unhealthy and terrible for children and terrible for people in general, for everyone, for literally everyone, because those children grow up to be adults. And it's awful. It's garbage. It's trash. It's but there's also other things. There's other stuff that's wrong with what she's describing, right? Like, I grew up with 4 siblings, and we pretty much always lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And that doesn't provide a lot of room, a lot of space, right? Like, so much less space than say, like where I live now. I live in a 3-bedroom house. I have enormously more space than I've ever had in my life. I own a 3-bedroom house. There is an upstairs. I've gone months without even going in the upstairs of my house, because I don't need to. Like, there's 2 bedrooms up there. I don't need to go up there. It's funny how much you don't need to utilize the space that you have. and it's crazy. Like to me, it's absurd. It's incredible. Like I can't even believe how much space I have. Like I'm looking over at my living room right now, and holy crap, that's like an incredible amount of space. I've got like 8 times the amount of space that I would need. Like I could live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I could move to a 1-bedroom apartment and I would be fine. Now I'd have to get rid of some stuff, some furniture. I wouldn't be able to cram all this furniture into a 1-bedroom, but I could live and function exactly the same in a 1-bedroom apartment. Now, but granted, growing up and being so crammed, it just kind of, it's like it gives you no real escape. It gives you no real room. It doesn't allow you to like be creative and expressive, and you also are just kind of like lost in the shuffle a lot of times. And that's not necessarily like, a lot of this isn't necessarily parents' fault. Like you could say it's your parents' fault. Why'd you keep having so many kids if you weren't able to like figure life out and provide the appropriate amount of space for those kids? All right, that's kind of fair, but also life just happens. Stuff happens, and you end up in a different place than you thought you would. I'm sure a lot of people are very hopeful, and they thought they'd make more money than they did. They'd have a larger space to live. Some things would have gone their way. So a lot of situations, bad situations that kids end up in, it's not, the blame isn't entirely on the parents, because like my parents, they did everything they could. Everything they could. They did a great job. Now, could they have done a way better job? Yes. I could list 100 ways they could have done a better job, but I'm not going to obsess over that. I'm not going to judge them and focus on the negative of what they did wrong. Now, it sounds like my parents were way, way, way better than Myra West's parents. I feel bad for her. Yeah, let's see what else you have to say, because hold on, folks. This might get even darker.
And it was really dog eat dog and survival of the fittest, and you either got stronger or you got broken. And I think
all right, my family was nothing like that. Like, we all kind of got along, and it just wasn't like that. It wasn't like competitive. Now, being that my family, my parents were Mormon, part of Mormonism is a thing called family home evening, where you play board games with your family. And those board games were quite competitive. So we had this like competitive outlet, and we had like a Nintendo 64, which is known to have like 4 controllers, right? So you're playing Mario Kart, you're playing GoldenEye, you're playing Turok. You're being competitive with each other. You have this competitive outlet. So it's sort of like an overall life competitiveness. It just didn't really exist for us. It's just like, oh, you got some beef with me? Let's settle this on the fields of Turok Rage Wars. Like, oh, you think you're good at this? Let's do a round of sequence. I'll murk you in sequence. Then guess what? That score doesn't get settled, so it moves over to the next board game. Let's play Parcheesi. Let's play some Crazy Eights, son. You know, it's just, yeah, I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to have like any kind of major conflict with my siblings. Granted, I was the youngest, and I was rowdy. Like I said before, I can run like a lunatic, and I'm enormous. Like, I was the largest kid in my grade in elementary school, and not only am I tall, but I also I'm like I got broad shoulders. I got a wide frame. I'm a lot of human being. So pair that with being like lightning fast, and I just, there wasn't much room. Like me and my brothers, we were rowdy. We would like play wrestle with each other and stuff, but there just wasn't enough room, and we just we there things never. I've never gotten in a legitimate fist fight with any of my siblings, and I got 3 brothers. And I don't know. They don't want a piece of me. What I'm getting at is I was very quickly, I was close to the size of them, and they don't want a piece. I'm taller than all of them at this point.
That it was such a harsh and horrible environment where everybody was turned against each other and fighting like dogs, and very viciously. There was no
fighting like dogs
or care or safety. Those words were not in my home. I'm realizing as an adult that it wasn't just...
Oh yeah, these turbo-religious households, one of the most unsafe environments a kid can be in, for sure. No doubt about it. Like, it's like, top level is like a Catholic church, then right below that is turbo-religious household of pretty much any religion.
That my siblings were the devil and horrible because they were all children, but that's still not an excuse. I'm never going to excuse abuse because of that. But a large part of it was that it was connected to the fact that my dad was terrifying and emotionally just completely unavailable and cold, and my mom and dad's marriage was extremely volatile and fiery and explosive and at times abusive in front of the kids. We all witnessed lots of screaming and fighting and like crying and just this horrible, like, and I remember as a child I viewed it very numbly, and I still...
Now I'm gonna share something with you. The reason that I will not be in a committed relationship with a terrible woman is because of what you just described. I will not subject children that I have in the future to that environment. That is crazy. People need to learn to be productive, functioning adults, which means you're not fighting in front of your kids. You're not screaming in front of your kids. You're not exposing your kids to violence.
Still have a lot of work to work through it, but
it just makes me like genuinely upset because way too many people out there in society are like willing to do exactly that, and it is it's awful. It's so awful for children.
There was just
and I'm sure you, Myra West, you probably feel exactly the same way, and that's probably like it's probably why you set like similarly high standards, is you don't want anyone to ever go through what you went through.
a lot of drama there, and eventually my parents divorced when I was 7. So because of the divorce, and then after as the divorce was going on, that was throughout my entire childhood. This lasted for like a good 7 years. They were fighting for like 7 years in courts or something, fighting over the kids, fighting over everything, and it was extremely, extremely, extremely messy and dramatic and horrible. And I was about to say they hated each other, but no, it was really my dad hated my mom deeply. And again, as an adult, I realized it was because he was hurt and he didn't know what to do with it, because he didn't work on himself his entire life.
Yeah, that's the problem with these religious people, is they blindly support each other. It's because they prioritize this weird religious nonsense of like worshiping Jesus, praising Jesus, as though it's above all else in their life. So then when they're being a terrible piece of crap human being, it's just excused. It's forgiven in the eyes of God because at least you're praising God, right? And so the people around them, their friends, their religious colleagues, or whatever you want to call them, they're not keeping them accountable, right? It's all just, oh, who cares, because it's all about praising Jesus. Nothing else matters. No, there should be no larger priority in your life than that. So just continue to be the same trash bag of a person you've always been. And yeah, it's people will think that the only way that they need to improve in their life is to give more praise to Jesus, which is insane. Because actually, what's going on in reality is that they're focusing this energy on Jesus is actually distracting them and keeping them from growing and advancing as a person and becoming a better person. And then on top of that, and then they're encouraged to, instead of working on themselves, spend more time praising Jesus. It's ridiculous.
He had so many issues because he had a hard childhood too. But he definitely passed down the trauma that was handed to him because he didn't stop it. Yeah. So
yeah, they call that generational trauma. And I am a Native American person, a member of a First Nation of Canada, and we had these things in Canada called residential schools, where basically these children were just taken by the government from their families, these Native kids, taken, thrown into these schools that were run by the Catholic Church, and beaten until they stopped speaking their own language and started speaking English. Now, these schools, I guess, taught you English, but almost nothing else. Like, that's the entire function of these schools. So they just take you for your whole childhood. They beat you. They abuse you physically, emotionally. They isolate you from your family. It's not like you're calling home. It's not like the parents are coming by. They can't. They often weren't. They didn't even know which one of these schools you were in. They didn't even know where these schools were. As far as they knew, the government just took your kids and you'd never see them again. As far as the kids knew, they'd never see their family again. A lot of kids died in these schools. They were subject to abuse of every kind. And you can imagine what that means with the Catholic Church being involved. And yeah, so the kids who did make it out of these schools have some major problems and aren't exactly the most well-adjusted people. And some of these people are still alive today. And yeah, it causes problems for generations to come, because if somebody's subject to something that insane and then they have kids, are they going to be like the greatest of parents? Or are they going to pass that trauma on? Usually they pass that trauma on. I was lucky to where my parent didn't do that. I'm very lucky. A lot of people of my race are not as lucky.
Both of my parents, I like to think of it, or I say that both of my parents were very distracted throughout my entire childhood fighting, and it just felt so neglectful to me, and it was. I mean, I'm the 7th of 8 kids, so it just, at this point, like, who can take care of that many kids? So because of abuse, mainly from my siblings, brothers, And nobody's stopping it, nobody's standing up for me. My parents not being there at all to care, to the extent where I can't remember a single time where I went to either of my parents and told them, oh, so and so punched me again, or they dragged me across the floor, or did this or this. I never went to my parents because they weren't there. I was always, like, as a child, seeking for my dad's approval.
I feel kind of bad that I'm playing the Goosebumps theme in the background, like slowed down, but I just love it. I just love like hearing that theme. So I've been using it for all my videos. It's kind of appropriate that this part is dark and that's like the background music that I'm playing, but at the same time, it does feel a tad bit inappropriate, and I apologize for that.
I absolutely adored him as a child, because what child doesn't? And I saw him as almost a god-like figure, because he came across that he knew everything about the world, about religion. He would do Bible studies with us every single morning, 7 days a week, one chapter of the Bible. So we went through the Bible a few times in my childhood. Very familiar. Okay, so because of all of that, all together, I grew up and I didn't understand why I was this way. But as a teenager, and it's followed me through my 20s.
All right, before I'm going to kind of cut this here. We're going to keep going, and I might just truck through the rest of the video and make the part 3, I think it is. Yeah, part 3, just the entire rest of the video, just a really long video. But I'm going to cut this here before it gets too... I feel like it's going to get a little bit darker and then hopefully lighter. But anyone out there who's like gone through a traumatic childhood, it can be very helpful to talk about it. And it's very very brave to talk about it on YouTube and really put yourself out there in this way. But yeah, nobody deserves to go through what you've gone through, and you're right that it has formed who you are in so many ways. But you're lucky because we all get to be different people. We get to continue to change and get better, and I think that's what you're doing. So I will see you all in part 3, where we will go through the rest of this.